last meeting, there was obviously a lot of pushback from the open academies, the community colleges. What's the strength of the commitment to reduce the number of those by some amount?
Let me start on that. We have many, I didn't get into this before, but I should have. We have many open enrollment academies at career centers, at our two-year colleges throughout the state that are doing a bang-up job. I mean, a really, really good job. We also have some who are not doing such a good job. And we have some that the pass rate on the state test is as low as 30%. So imagine you've got a graduating class and only 30% can pass the nursing test or the bar exam or whatever you want to come up with. That tells you something's wrong somewhere. Part of that is, frankly, that there's no screening to get into one of these open academies. Anybody who's got the money can literally walk in, for most of them, and put the money down and start the training. Even if it might be apparent that for physical reasons, overweight, who knows what, they're going to have a hard time, awfully hard time at the end passing the physical test. So, yeah, that's kind of where we are with academies. I think it was significant the working group did not say there should be X number of academies. They gave a couple of different possible alternatives. This is really going to come back to the sheriff and Ohio Police Officers Training Commission. They're going to have to look at this very, very hard. I can tell you that one of the recommendations in this report that we've not talked much about is an increased oversight from the OPATA staff. If you look at the report, there's significantly increased oversight. I can tell you the cost goes up the more academies that you have. If OPATA staff has to do the increased scrutiny with 65 different academies in the state of Ohio, that is going to be a lot of money. If they can do it with less number, incrementally the cost will go down.
I think, Reggie, you were the one who talked about implicit bias, and you talked about science. Is that something, what is implicit bias, and is that something that can be measured, and once you have measured it, what do you do with it?
Implicit, the name is implicit bias. Some call it unconscious bias, and others call it non-conscious bias. So you can Google the subject and get an awful lot of information on what, we just use the terminology that the Ohio State University's Kirwan Institute uses to describe, that subject matter. So basically, you start with the premise that we all have different biases, and it's not necessarily all related to law enforcement. You can have biases. A woman might have a bias about whether or not she can compete with men, but that might not be something that can surface unless until you know that you have that bias. So what we're trying to do, at least in the law enforcement part, is to get people to recognize whether or not they have any kind of bias that might prevent them from performing their work in the best possible way. There are actually tests that you can take. You can go online. For example, Harvard University has a test that anybody can take if you went online to actually teach or to find out more about your own personal biases. We were presented with a number of examples of unconscious bias, and I'll just give you one of those scenarios. There is a YouTube video that shows a person that has come up to a locked bike in a park And they use a scenario, I mean, in a populated area where you have a white kid, banging on the bike, trying to pick the lock, trying to do whatever he can to remove the chain. And people just, walk by and said, oh, he must work here and trying to remove the bike or what have you. Then you have a black kid, who come in. People immediately want to call the police on the person because they're thinking the first response is that they're trying to steal the bike. And then they brought, a really cute woman, a girl, college-age woman. And people not only, didn't call the police, they wanted to help her pick the lock. So, I mean, it's kind of a dramatic depiction of what this is, but it shows that we have these tendencies to be biased about certain kind of things. And what the Kirwan Institute and other higher education institutions have done is to try to reduce this to something where you can actually measure, in regards to your question, the biases that you might have. And again, it's not something we're trying to eradicate. We're trying to get people to eradicate their biases. We just want people to be aware of them.
You don't see that there would be somebody who would be denied a job or denied a place in the
No.
academy based on bias?
No. I think it will actually help them, if they actually were more conscious of their bias.